Hold on. It's hard to overstate how much different NSPM 7 is from the over 200 orders Trump has frantically signed since coming back into office. An executive order publicly lays out the course of day-to-day federal government operations, whereas a national security directive is a sweeping policy decree for the defense, foreign policy, intelligence, and law enforcement apparatus.
We're witnessing a new era of political violence. Since have tried to murder President Trump twice and tried to kill Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. In Minnesota, legislators and even children attending Mass were gunned down in cold blood in 2 separate incidents. And an assassin targeted and murdered our friend Charlie Kirk. A sniper shot 3 people at a Texas ICE facility, and now more than 200 violent rioters were at a Chicago ICE facility chanting, "Arrest ICE, shoot ICE." At least one had a gun. We've seen this before. We saw it in Portland and with the LA riots. These are not peaceful protests. These are coordinated attacks by radical extremists, and anyone who threatens or assaults our federal officers will be arrested and charged federally, not in some liberal state court. Same goes for anyone who's funding and aiding these extremists. You will be dismantled brick by brick. We are taking our country back. Make America safe again.
Roughly 48 hours after a gunman opens fire on ICE's facility, he ironically shoots migrants, but yet we know he was attacking the ICE agents. That was the target. He wrote it in a note. He wrote anti-ICE on a bullet. And yet you had these protesters in the streets shouting, "Arrest ICE, shoot ICE," when in that actual shooting, Rachel, in Dallas, ICE agents went in and risked their lives to try and rescue and bring those detained illegal criminal aliens to some safety, risking their lives. They have been blasted as Gestapo, but you know what I call them, are heroes.
Absolutely.
To go into the line you can see of gunfire.
The video inside
You know what I call them?
You
Our
see
heroes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh. Yeah, look at these dangerous protesters. They're deploying chemical weapons on our big beautiful. Oh shit, that's actually the ICE guys. Never mind. That's right. That's not actually that's nothing. That's not the protesters at all. That's actually the ICE agents that are doing that. Okay.
Running from the vans going in, and then you see all of these ICE agents coming out in the opposite direction, running towards the gunfire.
Running towards
in order to rescue.
And that's why they're heroes.
Yeah. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote this on X: "The Department of Justice will not stand idly by in the face of such lawlessness. At my direction, I am deploying the DOJ agents to ICE facilities and wherever ICE comes under siege to safeguard federal agents, protect federal property, and immediately arrest any and all individuals engaged in any federal crime."
How close do you think we are to a civil war? I think this is just discontent. That's it. I don't think we're that close. I'm not one of those guys. I've never been one of those guys that's like, it's a civil war. It's a civil war. I think until they just completely dismantle free speech and due process, you won't actually have real militancy. I think at most it's going to be mass unrest, and one side is going to have to give. And if there are significant enough numbers, on the people who oppose these kinds of ridiculous actions from the government, then it will most likely cause the government to just scale it back a little bit, inevitably fizzle out. And nobody's scared of you, bro. Dog, he's back. First of all, Twizzy, I feel bad that you protected your Twitter account. I meant no harm. I'm not even joking when I say this, not even a little bit, because it did feel like you ran away for a second because you felt like there were too many eyeballs. I will say I have met Steve Will Do It. I know you wanted to be a part of his LLC. I can put you in contact with him if you want. That's number one. Number two, hogs are always welcome here. Okay, we love, at least I do. I love a feet appreciator hog such as yourself. And last but not least, you know, a lot of your favorite content creators that you have on your profile, whether it be Keizo or whatever, like, you know, those are chill ass dudes. I don't know if they would like your worldview if they encountered it, because maybe you need to, you know, really reconsider your footprint, your profile, like what you put out there. But, you know, it is funny for you to have this level of hatred for someone like myself, but then also enjoy the content of so many people that I'm friends with. I don't understand it, but hopefully that'll allow you to reconsider, you know? These are people that I know personally. A lot of these people I've, you know, played sports with, interacted with, mostly positively. So don't know why you're this aggro towards me, but I feel like, I mean, he is also a massive gooner for sure. I mean, I could see that, but, you know, real recognize real on that front. But, you know, maybe you're just having a bad day and you wanted to let off some steam by being like, we're gonna commies or whatever. But, you know, just dial it back. Be normal, man. Be normal. Chill out. This guy's going to hunt and peck typing. You got to give him a little bit to reply. Wait, what? Yeah, Big Dog is gooning on Maine. Why are you so nice? I don't know. I just like, why am I so nice? Because people have bad days. No one is unironically that angry all the time. Like if he was following like, I don't know, Nick Fuentes or some shit, that'd be a little different. But this guy seems like more so a normie that's found himself on Twitch. Like he's spamming the Kai Cenat chat. You know what I mean? He's not like, someone has convinced him that I'm his op, but maybe he can turn it around. Better be careful these days with these psychos though. It's fine. Why do I get yelled at and this chug gets cuddled? Because the expectation is higher from you. If you're a leftist, you have to present yourself a certain way on the internet. And also leftists get more annoying. At least hogs are funny in their anger, you know? Also, half the time I get mad at like a leftist is because I'm also demonstrating compassion and then you're yelling at me for doing so. You know? You just come in and you're like, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you act as though people are a product of their social conditioning? You. Like, that's why I yell at leftists as well, because I'm like, please stop. It's just, this is my worldview.
We're going to have a little bit later the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, on because
this is why you have so many haters. They're just fans trying to get coddled. That's probably what it is.
We're also going to get into the fact that these apps that are tracking the location, that are giving the location of ICE agents, is putting them in increasingly danger.
If you've developed this app, right, and I get it that you might have an app for like cops that are waiting, speed traps. That's one thing. But I don't know what the other purpose of one of these apps is. They're designed to track ICE and to let people know where ICE is and is going. If you wind up giving information to a shooter who then uses that to somebody, why are you not going to be held culpable for that?
We talked to Jonathan Fahey yesterday, the former ICE director, and I asked him if, this breaks, are these apps breaking laws?
Yeah.
He makes the case that they will. There's a disclaimer on these apps that says that this is for information only and not intended to obstruct with federal immigration law, but that's exactly what it's doing. Now, connect all the dots, Charlie, very quickly. You see ICE agents and operations are being put on real time on these sites where people can find it. And one party, in this case, the Democrats, continue this insane rhetoric dehumanizing ICE agents as Gestapo in slave patrols. The likelihood that a deranged individual will act upon it, that's exactly what the sort of thing we just saw in Dallas.
An 800% increase in attacks on ICE. Clearly, I think you make a great point, Charlie.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Lee.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
A protest that erupted after
Yeah, this was a major L for America in general. But before we get to this guy, as I covered yesterday, let's talk about Trump's NSPM 7 labels. They are labeling common beliefs as terrorism indicators. New Order targets anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-capitalism opinions, with the mainstream media distracted by the made-for-TV drama of James Comey indictment, which, by the way, that's such a non-issue. Like, I know that's a severe violation, right? But it's also a non-issue because it's just like, that's going to handle itself. What are we talking about? Like, that's not a serious, it's a serious setback, but it's also not like a serious problem because there's 0%. Once that gets the court, it's getting thrown out. Like, that's crazy. When people say, oh, is this a distraction? That is a distraction. The reason why I say that's a distraction is because I look through the indictment. It's so ridiculous. It is so ridiculous, but dumbass liberals are so locked in on that because Jim Comey was like a television figure for them. Like, that is, I would go so far as to say, that was like, this is even more ridiculous than the Jimmy Kimmel shit. Because, like, straight up going after like random liberals on TV by utilizing the FCC is a violation of the First Amendment. Whereas, like, frivolous litigation that the administration is like kick-starting when it's clear that it's not going to go anywhere, I think that's not that. I don't think that's going to be as big of a problem. Twizzy speaks. What did he say? My goat. Yes, bro. You caught me watching the biggest streamer ever. Sorry, Steve, and then I grew up watching Nelk. Like what? Wait, what? Twizzy's back. My goat Twizzy is back. We're going to win him over. I promise. He's at the precipice. He grew up watching Nelk. Maybe he's not in his 40s. He talks like a boomer, but perhaps he's not. Anyway, with the mainstream media distracted for the made-for-TV drama of James Comey's indictment, Trump has signed a little-noticed national security directive identifying anti-Christian and anti-American views as indicators of radical left violence. Called the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, it's being referred to as NSPM 7 by administration insiders. This is the first time in American history that there is an all-out government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, Trump's Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller said, referring to the issuance. To the extent that the major media noticed the directive at all, they, even C-SPAN, incorrectly labeled it an executive order, like this week's designation of Antifa as a domestic organization. Wait, hold on. It's hard to overstate how much different NSPM 7 is from the over 200 orders Trump has frantically signed since coming back into office. An executive order publicly lays out the course of day-to-day federal government operations, whereas a national security directive is a sweeping policy decree for the defense, foreign policy, intelligence, and law enforcement apparatus. National security directives are often secret, but in this case, the Trump administration chose to publish NSPM 7, only the 7th since he's come into office. Previous national security directives have been controversial, even politically earth-shaking. In 1980, for example, President Jimmy Carter signed the top-secret Presidential Directive 59, directing the new nuclear warfighting policies that persisted until the end of the Cold War. When revealed, PD 59 caused a public furor. Similarly, President George W. Bush signed a series of classified national security directives. Similarly, President George W. Bush signed a series of classified national security directives after 9/11, the most famous of which authorized NSA's unlawful domestic intercepts, a directive that wasn't publicly revealed until 4 years later. In NSPM 7, countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence, President Trump directs the Justice Department, the FBI, and other national security agencies and departments to fight his version of political violence in America, retooling a network of joint terrorism task forces to focus on leftist political violence in America. This vast army, made up of federal, state, and local agents, as Trump aide Stephen Miller said, form the central hub of that effort. The thing is, I don't think liberals are even remotely aware of what this is, okay? Or at most, they think that it's just about, radical leftists or something. People that they also don't really like, people that they see as like spoilers to Kamala Harris, even people like myself. It's not. This is a way to utilize intelligence communities' powers to actively target and prosecute, investigate, and potentially apprehend anyone and everyone that has exhibited a anti-racist thought, okay? Declaring them enemies of the state. This is also directly antagonistic to the First Amendment. This is a significant attempt to outwardly cripple the First Amendment. Okay? NSPM 7 directs a new national strategy to disrupt any individual or groups that foment political violence, including before they result in violent political acts. In other words, they're targeting pre-crime, to reference Minority Report. The Trump administration isn't only targeting organizations or groups, but even individuals and entities whom NSPM 7 says can be identified by any of the following indicators of violence: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, as in people who say anti-immigrant sentiments are born out of racism, extremism on race, as in to say that black people should not be disproportionately targeted. Because remember, by the police. Because remember, this is the front-facing, most marketable positions that they can put out there. Do you understand? It will extend to anyone and everyone that is a liberal, that is someone who is maybe even not a liberal, but goes, I don't think racism is good. This extends to every single person in the United States of America at any given moment. Extremism on gender. What could that be? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family. Hostility towards those who hold traditional views on religion, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. These are intentionally vague, but if you look at the combination of what they're singling out, this ranges everywhere from people like myself, people like ourselves in this community, all the way down to your fucking parents that were lifelong Republican voters who might have switched at some point to vote for Kamala Harris or to vote for Joe Biden. Do you understand? The United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts, the directive states. A pre-crime endeavor, preventing attacks before they happen, is core to the post-9/11 concept of counterterrorism itself. No longer satisfied to investigate acts of terrorism after the fact to bring terrorists to justice, the Bush administration adopted preemption. And for a lot of people who were oblivious to what they were doing at the time, this simply meant round-the-clock, 24/7 surveillance in Muslim neighborhoods, trying to find, like, the FBI used to do this all the time, trying to find people who are like, who have like intellectual disabilities and whatnot, to try to goad them into doing something, like to try to radicalize them, then goad them into doing something, and then stopping it ahead of time to basically say, look, we did it. Many such cases took place on U.S. soil, okay? This happened quite a bit. This happened a lot. The FBI used to do this all the fucking time, okay? They would go after like some autistic teenager who's Muslim online, and they'd be like, ooh, you should get some Tenorite at this drop site that we left for you. And then they would apprehend the person and be like, this guy's a terrorist. We apprehended an Islamic terrorist, okay? Overseas, that led to aerial assassination by drones and special operations kill missions. Domestically, it led to a counterterrorism campaign whose hallmark was excessive and illegal government surveillance and use of undercover agents and confidential human sources to trap and entrap would-be terrorists. You don't actually have to do anything wrong for the federal government to try to present an argument, because in this circumstance, it's more so about building a narrative. So I think what they're doing, just like McCarthyism, just like post 9/11 Islamophobia, what they are trying to create here is an intelligence community backed effort to create a narrative of left-wing terror. So basically what they're going after here, what they're going to be going after here is goading people into Fed posting, as we like to call it, and then trying to apprehend people for engaging in acts of Fed posting to create a narrative, or maybe even let a couple of these incidents go, right? Coerce people, intimidate people into taking action, and then letting a couple of them go, and then say, you see, this is a real dangerous, this is a real violent and dangerous endeavor, we must react. Because right now, I mean, if this is a fully competent administration, which it's not, but right now, there isn't a lot of appetite for this kind of thing. There isn't a lot of appetite for this kind of like mass apprehension, right? But the goal is to manufacture some kind of consent for the federal government to start apprehending and arresting anyone and everyone that is remotely demonstrated empathy at any point. This tactic sounds familiar if you are aware of how America's allies have worked, or puppet states, dictatorships, fascist forms of governance all around the world that we've aligned with. We have done this everywhere else. It's called the Jakarta method for a reason. It was first implemented in Jakarta. Now we are turning that same scrutiny and same principled authoritarian fascist technique to the domestic front. Fascism is colonialism turned inward. And this is fascism. This is imperialism and colonialism turned inward. This is happening at the domestic level now. There is a reason why the terrorism designation, albeit vague, has only been utilized for foreign actors. In the United States of America, no matter how many actual designated acts of domestic terror a group participates in or commits, whether it be Atomwaffen or the Patriot Front or numerous other right-wing organizations, there is no internal mechanism for identifying domestic terrorism and prosecuting domestic terrorism at the point of organizing. This has not happened with the KKK either, right? The reason why it has not happened with the KKK or any of these groups is because of the First Amendment. The second reason why it's never happened with right-wing groups, of course, is because they are not considered too disruptive to the pre-existing hierarchies that the American government has consistently defended. This has, however, happened to the Black Panther Party and numerous other black revolutionary groups. During the civil rights struggle, this is precisely what they did with the Black Panther Party and numerous other organizations. They did it. They disrupted it. They infiltrated these groups. They assassinated its leaders. And I suspect that that's what they're trying to do now. However, even with the Black Panther Party and numerous other black liberation organizations, there was still ultimately a foreign actor that they could associate this movement with. At the time, it was the USSR, right? This was during the Cold War still. So they could still associate it with the USSR, or they could still, there still was a lot of racial animosity, way more so than it exists now. There is racial animosity in this country. White supremacy has not gone away. This is an inherent contradiction that Americans have never addressed, adequately. Having said that, however, the racial tensions in this country at this stage are nowhere near where they were during the civil rights struggle. Okay? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I do not suspect there is enough appetite from the broader base of support, or even just like the broader base of Americans, to allow the government to intercept, infiltrate, and engage in this kind of ridiculous prosecution for any kind of anti-racist organizing, for example. So on the one hand, I don't think liberals are aware of what's coming next. And I keep repeating this over and over again. I talk about how dangerous this is, how worrisome this is, and how un-American this is, even though it has happened throughout different periods of American history in our darkest chapters. But also, on the other hand, I think once it kicks into high gear, more and more Americans will start getting frustrated. Adam Johnson, reports on a similar incident. A federal judge Thursday sentenced a former U.S. Navy sailor to 12 years in prison for plotting a terror attack against a naval station, Great Lakes in Chicago's north suburbs, and seeking to help the Iranian government move radioactive material to the United States. Of course, there were no Iranians involved in this. Reading this headline and article, you would have no idea no Iranians were remotely involved in any of this. Like 99% of FBI foiled terror plots, the plot was a whole cloth invention of the FBI targeting a single dipshit in an elaborate Truman Show style ruse. A reasonable person would come away reading this tweet and article under the distinct impression Iran was attempting to smuggle in radioactive material into the U.S., but they weren't. No Iranian or radioactive material were involved. Some moron simply thought they were because FBI duped him into thinking they were. All of this politically consequential information is lost. The FBI foiled its own plots so they can, 1, scare us about official enemies, and 2, trick the public into thinking they're all Jack Bauer. The vast majority of these foiled plot cases are total horseshit. This is from the Human Rights Watch report from 2014, The Illusion of Justice, talking about exactly what I was saying about the FBI consistently building up a narrative of like Islamic terror at the height of the war on terror, the global war on terror, in an effort to universalize the fears that Americans should feel so they feel more self-righteous and more comfortable with all of the domestic interference in political organizing, and also feel more comfortable with the metric ton of violence that we were dishing out in the Middle Eastern region. Some analyses show, according to Salon.com, that only 1% of quote-unquote terrorists caught by the FBI could actually be said to be quote-unquote terrorists. Like, you know, people who legitimately, on their own, radicalize and choose to take action, and then the FBI infiltrates or intercepts their communications with like a foreign entity or whatever, and then stops them before they actually engage in an act of like stochastic terror. Okay? The overwhelming majority of intelligence community operations of this sort are built around coercion and entrapment. But this, at the very least, plays a formative role in designing a media landscape, especially by pliant media members who will cover this stuff without actually diving into the details to justify what other additional measures that the government may take in terms of mass surveillance and in terms of disruption and creating watch lists and creating an environment of insecurity around any sort of expression of political dissent. That is the overarching goal of the government. Now, with Donald Trump's directive retooling the counterterror apparatus to go after Americans at home, this means monitoring political activity or speech as an investigative method to discover radicalism. Contrary to other national security documents, all during the post-Watergate era, NSPM 7 doesn't even mention the First Amendment or the fundamental right of Americans to organize and protest. The focus on speech is evident throughout NSPM 7. The directive says that political violence is the result of organized campaigns that often begin with the left, dehumanizing targets in an anonymous chat forums. Okay, peki. Dur baba tamam. Okay, göndereceğim. Nereye? Okay. Gel, aldım. Okay. My dad is trying to talk to me while I'm reading this thing. Jesus Christ. Hold on. In anonymous chat forums, in in-person meetings, social media, and even educational institutions. Remember, even in college, okay, even in a classroom. To give a sense of how broad this formulation is, Trump's earlier designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist group was accompanied by a White House fact sheet singling out people who celebrated Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, last December. As I wrote at the time, this describes a lot of Americans. This is not a political singling out of radical potential terrorism or something, okay? This is straightforwardly prosecuting whoever they want to prosecute. Like, this is trying to create an environment where there is just cause to go after whoever the fuck they want. This is so over-encompassing and so broad that it literally has, it's not just people like myself. It's just, this means Trump voters even. You know what I mean? This is anyone and everyone. Hold on. 1 second. I just have to finish this thing that I'm doing. Okay. Trump's new national security memorandum also alludes to Mangione, but adds to it even larger categories of potential targets. NSPM 7 is fundamentally a law enforcement directive, and it dispenses with the complications of using the active duty military or the National Guard in pursuit of political violence. It directs the Department of Justice to focus the FBI's approximately 200 joint terrorism task forces to the new mission. The FBI network of task forces comprises over 4,000 members, including FBI personnel and task force officers from more than 500 state and local agencies and 50 federal agencies, including special agents, police officers, intelligence analysts, and surveillance technicians. First established in New York City in 1980 to systematize FBI and NYPD cooperation, today there are task forces around the country, including at least one in each of the FBI's 55 field offices. For the Trump White House, the beauty of using an already existing network is that it bypasses congressional oversight and scrutiny and even obscures federal activity to governors and legislatures at the state level. States, cities, and local police have already signed memoranda of agreements with the feds to fight terrorism, and officers are already assigned as task force officers. Okay? Hold on 1 second. NSPM 7 says that the JTTFs shall investigate potential federal crimes relating to acts of recruiting or radicalizing persons for the purpose of political violence, terrorism, or conspiracy against rights, and the violent deprivation of any citizen's rights. These last two parts here are also intentionally vague to be as broad and as over-encompassing as possible, okay? Because some of this stuff, like radicalizing people for the purpose of political violence, directly intervenes with the First Amendment, because you can say that about anyone, right? You can say that about anyone and everyone. You're Cook, no. I mean, yeah, this is basically written as a fucking, written as a way to apprehend and single me out as like a fucking domestic terrorist, but it's written in such a way that it also extends to fucking literally David Pakman even, you know what I mean? It's written as a way that this could mean anyone from people like myself all the way to like the Podjohns, okay? It's not just people like myself. It's not like Jason and Ruhe or whatever. It straight up implies, the way this is written, it straight up implies that if you're like a part of the Satan Church, for example, and you know, you're doing like a fundraiser or a back to school drive or something, you are potentially liable here. You can be prosecuted. You can be investigated. Philip DeFranco, like every single person that has ever conveyed any sort of like anti-racist statement is liable for an investigation or a prosecution. There's a gender indication there that means that if you're gay or trans, again, you could be pegged as an extremist. If you're black or brown and you have exhibited anti-racist tendencies, or if you have participated in any sort of like anti-white supremacist action, anti-ICE protests, extremism on migration, that's what this means. I know a lot of you are laughing at me saying you could be pegged and going, lol, pegged as gay and trans, lol, don't peg the gays and trans, but like you're not understanding the severity of this crisis once again. Okay? This is an attempt to criminalize any sort of non-Republican viewpoint. I don't even want to say leftist viewpoint here. Okay? I don't even want to say non-Republican viewpoint here, because like this even could potentially criminalize Republican viewpoints as well, as long as they are a Republican that says, yeah, I also think ICE is fucked up. You are now a target. You can be designated as a rhino. The Attorney General shall issue specific guidance that ensures domestic terrorism priorities include politically motivated terrorist attacks such as organized doxing campaigns, swatting, rioting, looting, trespass, assault, destruction of property, threats of violence, and civil disorder. The NSPM 7 says, civil disorder, ? I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but the plain truth is that the NSPM-7 is a declaration of war on anyone who does not support the Trump administration and its agenda. Yes, it repeats the word violent over and over to purport only to go after citizens who are moved to take up arms, but it also directs monitoring and intelligence collection to map and target new evildoers, to borrow a Bush label he took from the Bible just that days after 9/11. Okay, hold on. The partisan focus couldn't be more obvious. The real problem is this. Since Charlie Kirk was murdered, a friend of mine assassinated, nothing changed on their side. White House counterterrorism czar Sebastian Gorka told Newsmax after NSPM-7 was signed. Not one leader, not one leftist thought leader, member of Congress, senator, nobody has said we distance ourselves from the violent rhetoric. The left refuses to rid themselves of the justification for violence, Gorka continued. And as such, President Trump is taking measures to protect us from the violent rhetoric that becomes snipers and bullets. Remember, it's not violence that they are combating. It's rhetoric. Okay? It's not violence that they're combating. It's rhetoric. As in, any sort of expression of discontent towards the Trump administration or any number of different actions that they take can be considered violent rhetoric. They are trying to tie, I don't fucking like what ICE is doing, or ICE is Gestapo, or this is Nazi shit, to a false claim that this means like you are opening up a floodgate of enforcement. They are trying to do this. They already tried to do this with material support. They've been trying to do this with material support to terror organizations, trying to claim that speech is material support for terror organizations. Okay. And they're doing it now at the domestic level as well. For the record, as it stands currently in the United States of America, material support does not extend to language. Okay. It is not illegal in the United States of America to even fucking say you support known designated terror organizations, foreign terror organizations. You can say you support it. It is, up until this moment, not been illegal. We are a nation where fucking David Duke, the grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, ran for office. We are a nation where members of the American Nazi Party run for office. Okay? While you might consider that to be extreme, and I certainly do, the reason for why this has been allowed is partially because of the First Amendment. Now, they're taking that away. Another aspect of this is, again, anti-Americanism. Remember, these are the hallmarks of terror, they say. Anti-Americanism. Now think, close your eyes for a brief moment and think. Who do the Republicans accuse of anti-Americanism? It's not just those who liberals consider to be radicals themselves. It's everyone. Okay? The entirety of the Democratic Party and its base of support. Who do the Republicans accuse of anti-capitalism? Nancy Pelosi is a communist in the eyes of the Republican Party. Kamala Harris is a socialist communist in the eyes of the Republican Party. Anti-Christianity as well. This is designed to target any and every liberal, any and every person on U.S. soil that has ever looked at what Trump is doing and said, I don't like this. Yeah, reminder, this was a literal candidate that the Republicans propped up, Arthur J. Jones, American neo-Nazi Holocaust denier, and he almost won. Yeah, he's also been a member of the Populist Party, a far-right political party active in the 90s and 80s. Wasn't this the guy who ran in the Illinois district over and over again? And he almost fucking won in the 3rd congressional district in one of the elections. Yeah, he got the most. Illinois' 3rd congressional district general election in 2018. He was the Republican that got the most votes. He got 25%, 26%. Of course, another part of this story is the question, the obvious question, is there a difference between far left extremism and far right extremism? And the answer, of course, is yes. Now, I'm biased. I'm obviously biased. But think for a brief moment. We are billed as far left extremists and as far left believe that everyone should have health care. We believe that the interests of profits cannot go over the interests of the people. We believe that everyone should have more autonomy in the workplace. We believe that people should have free education all the way up to the college level, no matter what their background looks like. We believe in a more tolerant approach to immigration instead of immediately deciding that things we don't understand are awful and scary and must be excised and destroying America. We believe that these populations are actually helpful to build this multifaceted, diverse American culture. Is that the same as the exact opposite of this position, to target people due to inalienable traits and characteristics and then punishing them and putting them in concentration camps and kicking them out of this country? I don't think so. Fantastic stuff.